PwC, and Mike Bartlett, who is a entrepreneur, executive, angel investor, all the above. Our topic today is really about innovation. So we're going to start off with topics about innovation in big companies with Chris, and Mike will take us over to the small companies. The way it'll work is Chris present, have an opportunity for some questions and answers, and then we'll move right on into Mike. Generally speaking, our events are very casual, so feel free to ask questions and whatever you need, and afterwards, if you want to hang out, we have the room for a while. A couple of announcements. We do have a second Saturday of each month meeting, so we have a second, our April monthly meeting is coming up, and we have a person presenting from Alcatel on wireless technologies, so you'll all be getting an announcement for that. Hope you'll all show up. With that being said, I'm going to go ahead and let Chris do his thing, and please, thank you very much.
Thank you. Appreciate it. How are we doing there?
Microsoft is throwing some errors.
Okay. Well, thank you for having me here tonight. As Carl said, my name is Chris Curran. I'm a partner with PwC, which is the shorthand for PricewaterhouseCoopers these days. I joined PwC a little bit more than a year ago from a small consulting firm. So I do have almost 20 years of startup experience myself, having tried to build and grow a little consulting firm called Diamond with various incarnations, but started out as Diamond Technology Partners, which was one of the firms that Safeguard Scientifics brought out back in the Safeguard CMGI days, if you're familiar with those happenings. But anyway, that's not what I'm here to talk about. So I guess Mike and I are tag teaming a little bit tonight on some different observations and lessons from our experiences, and I'm taking the sort of the big company perspective, and Mike's taking the smaller company, startup, and smaller company perspective. I should also say my experience and background is largely in the information technology world, so my examples and stories and so on come from that largely. But my observations also in terms of how that function and those innovations do or don't permeate the whole organization. So that's something I spend a lot of time trying to help companies think through. The other thing I would add here is that my experiences also tend to be innovating and innovation as it pertains to the core business versus the incubator or the carve-out, for example. I do have some experiences, some dated experiences, but largely it's about companies who are trying to figure out how to innovate their core, whether it's creating new products and services through their core channels, or trying to just improve their business as it stands. So that's kind of my context and where I come from. I guess I'm going to stand on this side and flip from here. So I tend to be a glass half full guy, but for some reason the problem idea came to me talking about the big company challenges. So that's where I'm starting, but I promise that it'll be a positive sort of what to do about it kind of conversation more than, griping about what's going on. So anyway, so I figured I'd kind of lay out, I'm sure there are long lists of problems that big companies have around innovating. And again, innovating, I'm talking about innovating the core, not creating the carve-outs or the incubators. We can talk about that a little bit later. So anyway, so my first problem of innovation, and let me also say that this is a very hot topic with companies that I talk to and we work with. Help us figure out how to innovate, okay, whatever that means. And most of those organizations have taken a crack at trying to do it once, twice, 3, 10, 20 times. And these are the sort of systemic problems that I sort of see cropping up. So one of them is unclear focus. So what is the innovation function? Are there more than one floating around? How do they work together? How do they organize and coordinate? So one of the things that I do is I run a survey every year. And it's called the Digital IQ Survey, and it's largely about how organizations think about strategic use of information technology. And it's a survey that asks, this This time around, we did just North American participants, but we've also done it globally. And we asked this year 500 participants, half business executives and half IT executives. A ton of questions about how they think about information technology. And so one of the questions we asked them is, what's your focus? What's the information technology focus around innovation? So we asked them, to answer against these four questions. So are you innovating? Are you primarily innovating around creating new products and services, around engaging customers, around improving business process, or around actually improving the IT function itself? Because this is a lot about how information technology is managed. So think about your experiences and which one you would answer, either for the information technology or function or just in general around innovation. And so you could replace the IT function with the X function: marketing, human resources, operations, manufacturing, whatever. Well, so this is the 4th year we've done the survey. This results are almost identical every year. So if you notice, the last 2 bullets were business process and the function itself, not market-facing stuff, not new products, not new services, not engaging new customers. 75% say every year that they're focused on the latter 2 things, the internal things, not the market-facing things. And the interesting thing is that it just doesn't intuitively match the hype in the market around the Googles of the world. There's every day there's a new story about some great new information technology innovation. And we talk about it, we maybe desire to do it, but we don't do it. The reality is we're focused on things we can control. And particularly, again, from the information technology perspective, we automate business processes, so we have a lot of control over that. And we have our own function. We have a lot of control over that. It's the stuff that requires a lot of collaboration and a lot of different skills and capabilities that have to all come together to make something happen, and on understanding the marketplace and the fear of introducing things into the market and testing them with real customers, things like that makes people, I think, kind of scared. So I think one of the real challenges is that just figuring out whatever the scope of the innovation function is, or the innovation idea or opportunity or team or whatever it is that you're doing, getting agreement with all the important people of what you're doing and why you're doing it. So you're not saying, I'm out there creating new products and services, and somebody else over here says, no, you're not. That's my job. So I think that's a big question, big challenge. So that's number 1. Problem number 2, it's managed. Innovation process. Innovation is managed. Well, okay, there's a great quote that I think is attributed to Peter Drucker, that innovation is work, which I think is a great quote, because it is. But the problem is that a lot of big companies try to take old processes, processes that don't fit, and apply them to this innovation thing. And one of the real interesting attributes, I guess, of the management is, how do you think about funding innovation, or innovation projects, or experiments, or demos, or prototype, whatever it is you're doing. And what this is a chart that we use sometimes to talk about different kinds of investments that you need to think about. Everything's not an ROI investment. But what we see is a lot of big companies try to make every investment, every budget item, every request, something that has to have an ROI. Well, if you don't know what it is yet, how can you have an ROI? So likewise, there are other kinds of investments, like I need to go upgrade my email system. Does that have an ROI? Well, it's kind of a stay in business, half cost of doing business kind of investment. It's not even really, maybe it's an investment. I don't know if you want to call it that or not. But the point is that there are a bunch of different models for thinking about budgeting and gating innovation spend. I won't even call it investment yet. To get to the point where you collect enough data and have enough experiences that you could build an ROI business case or not, right? But you have to go through the process of figuring out what it is, what the idea is, what legs it might have, and do enough testing that you can collect some data to build a real case. What I see is a lot of organizations try to build the business case without any data, or they make up stuff and it's a hollow business case. It's crazy and it's laughable, and they all sit around the table and laugh at it, but they still put it through the system, versus saying, let's call a spade, and let's make it a real gated process that says, hey, we're going to put X $1,000 on stage 0 projects in this innovation pipeline. And the gating factor is you run out of money. And when you're done, you have to make a presentation and talk about, is this thing have legs or not? And if so, what's the next step? And that may be it. Maybe a time box or a dollar box, and that's it. You're going to spend a certain amount of money on this stuff, and you chunk it up accordingly, and you spend it. And that's your commitment to the organization around investment, that you're going to do those things. Anyway, so everything's not ROI. Another part of this survey that I mentioned, we ask, how do you measure innovation? So these are the top performers. So we did this, the top performers are by revenue growth and margin growth and a couple of other measures. It's an aggregate. But it basically represents 15% of the sample. So innovation measurement, explicit business value is the top. Number of ideas brought to market, the third, 25% say they don't measure it. These are the top performers in our survey. 25% don't measure. 14% said the number of ideas total generated out of the innovation thing. 14% said budget, and 10% said the number of patents generated. What I think is really interesting about this is explicit business value, is something that requires, back to our prior little conversation there, is that requires a really sophisticated level of connection from the very beginning of the idea all the way down to some value that you might be able to get in the marketplace. I think it's crazy that this is the primary measure for innovation, is the business value. Because a totally separate topic is how investments are tracked. The benefit, the business cases of anything in an organization are tracked through to value. I mean, I think probably maybe fewer than 10% of companies I've worked with in 25 years have actually been able to take something they spent money on and actually tracked it to its value in the market more than maybe one time. They've actually said, this thing has been existing in the marketplace for a year, 2 years, 3 years, whatever, and we're really getting the value we thought we were going to get from it, whatever it is. My world is an IT investment world, so I don't see that ever with IT investments. Yes?
Why are you surprised that 42% of 3/4 of your sample is focused on internal innovation?
Why am I surprised? Because I'm generally surprised because of the lack of rigor and focus on tracking anything. But I hear what you're saying. I mean, that it would be easier to do it if it were things that you could control and you could actually say, hey, I cut out this many steps in this process using this innovation. I could see you could do it. But I don't see anybody doing that. Forget innovation. I just don't see people going beyond the business case itself. They get the money, they get the sign of the check signed, and they're off and running. And the focus on actually tracking, even intermediate value through that, whatever the investment is, I don't see it. I wish it were there, but I don't see it. Okay, so it's managed as a problem, and it's not managed as a problem. So the flip side of the it's managed problem is it's not managed. And so what do I mean by this? I think the not managed problem is that we have what some people like to call the ring fencing problem. Is we don't have any boundaries around the thing that we're trying to innovate. We're just going to say, innovate, go forth and innovate. Here's your team, here's your budget, go have fun. Come up with some great new ideas. I hope they hit you over the head. And especially in the big organizations, this can cause the creation of these little glass houses and people off in the corner spending money and no one knows what they're doing, that kind of problem. And so I think the opportunity here is to figure out, in whatever the scope is that this innovation is happening, what are the boundaries? What's the fence around your area? Whether it's a whole business or a business function or a specific customer segment or a product type or whatever it is, somehow you have to draw the boundaries around it. And in fact, I would even go farther and say that you have to have some kind of business basis to use to run something against to say, is this something we're going to experiment with or not? We're going to try out or not? And there are a couple of thoughts around that. One is there was an HBR article written, I don't know, 10 or 15 years ago that talked about business capabilities as a way to articulate what a business does and what it's trying to do. And Walmart was one of the great examples in there, and this is one that I documented this sort of reading the article and kind of trying to extract what the business capabilities were that they were talking about there. But it seems to be pretty hot right now in big companies talking about this idea of a business capability, which is sort of at a lower level of detail than an objective and a higher level of detail than a requirement that you might do for a software system or some sort of business plan. And so if anybody's interested in the reference, I'm happy to email it to you. I'll give you my information later. But it's a really good piece that talks about sort of a way to think about design. And so if you have an organization that is trying to find a happy medium between a 20-page board of directors deck and a 100-page requirements document, this thing might help do a lot of that. This capabilities idea. But the notion here is if you had some sort of touchstone or reference point that defines what the business is trying to do, you could prioritize it and actually say, okay, I'm going to pick this capability set here to innovate around for the next year, 2 years, 3 years, whatever. It kind of reminded, when I was going through this, it kind of reminded me of a conversation I had earlier this week at my son's high school. They're getting ready to convert to iPads. So they're putting all the textbooks on iPads, and or they're bringing them into the iPad world. And so I was sitting down with, I offered, to throw in my 10 cents to the IT director and the textbook committee and so on at the school, thinking that, it'd be a great way to sort of experiment, get some more experience with another organization thinking about this stuff. And so I said, so tell me what you guys are doing. And they said, okay, well, told me about all the great, application management software they're looking at, and their purchase plans and all this other stuff. And I'm like, okay, well, what about what the users are thinking about? What do they want to do? Well, they're going to get textbooks, and they're going to, be able to grade papers on their iPads and all that stuff. And I'm like, okay, well, that's great, but how do you know that the 5 most important things that they're doing are going to be supported or not supported? I mean, what are you going to tell them? So the idea, I introduced the idea of, why don't you try to document the 30 scenarios, that are going to be out there? I mean, what are the 10 scenarios that teachers have and the 20 scenarios the students have, and why not just document those in some way and then use that to prioritize and try to make sure you've got your bases covered, So the idea of, a student taking notes on a new chapter in a chemistry book versus, hey, I have a really cool note-taking app that the students can use. It's that sort of idea. But anyway, so it's just another sort of a way to think about how the innovation fence can be drawn. You could do it by scenarios, you could do it by customer segments, you could do it by a number of things. So the fourth problem is the disconnection problem. And 2 examples come to mind around this, and they both have to do with, Mike and I were talking about this briefly before, they both have to do with the model in which the innovation is done in a separate business unit, where there is a separate organizational structure of some kind that initially was set up because they didn't want to, poison it, the whole innovator's dilemma thing, and they didn't want to poison it with the core culture of the organization. Maybe they thought it was going to be a venture capital kind of or private equity kind of model or something like that. But what has happened in both these cases, one is electronics manufacturer, not one based in Texas, and another one is an insurance company. They both have these separate business units set up to innovate. And they each made investments in a lot of different interesting companies. And then, one way or the other, some executive says, investment group over here, what are you guys doing to help our core business? And, then all of a sudden, people in the investment group start trying to take their, the products from the companies they're investing in and shove them in to places over in the business, core business. And that never worked, never works. Because they weren't connected in the first place. And it's one group saying, I've already made this investment over here. So-and-so executive says we have to figure out how to use it over here, as opposed to figuring out how to connect them from the start. Now, I'm not poo-pooing the idea of having a separate business unit, but again, it gets back to the objectives that were set in the first place. If the objectives are to find some new, to make some money by investing in some cool companies that might pop more like a portfolio, I'm like, that's great. But don't set out doing that and then at the 12th hour come back and say you have to take those things and now make them relevant and valuable to the core business. So that was my picture of the separate lab. I thought it was a great picture. Anyway, so this is my summary. There's basically 4 things. One, you have to agree explicitly on the expectations for whatever the innovation function or team or group or concept is. In the beginning, up front, figure out, are you aligned, and are you going to go off and try to do something out in the marketplace, and then you got the some executive in the product or sales or customer area saying, when you come to the table with all these new ideas, I'm like, what are you doing? That's my job. I think it does have to be managed, but it has to be managed differently. You can't manage it like sort of the stay in business kind of investment or an ROI investment. It's a separate kind of investment with separate processes, separate teams, separate gates, separate checkpoints, separate governance model. You have to define what the ring fence is around the function, what it is that you are and aren't innovating around, to have some focus so you can actually prioritize both the ideas coming in and also the results coming out to figure out whether they are really impacting those areas or not. And then somehow you have to connect it to the rest of the business. As I was thinking through this, one thing that didn't really pop up on this list that is the organizational approach, the models that are being used, because there are a lot of really good models out there that are working. So I think it's less about the organizational structure that's being used to do those things and more about how it's being set up, communicated, scoped, and linked. These are some of the organizational models that I've seen that have worked. I worked with a financial services company who initially started their information technology innovation efforts in IT, except they were focused on the market, and that was one of the gotchas. Because they really didn't have any kind of buy-in or authority, if you will, to go do that. So they actually took a step back and were talking, somehow stumbled on a new product group that was starting up to create some new financial products. And they were asking for a lot of data, and they were asking for some help thinking through some analytics and things like that. And all of a sudden there was a light bulb that went off that, hey, this is really about the information and the technology underlying as well. So they put sort of a multifunctional, multi-skilled team together inside the product group with IT folks and marketing and sales and actuary and all kinds of other people, and did this together. So that's sort of the integrated product services team that doesn't live necessarily in any one of those functions. It's a separate, but in the core business. Then there's the function-specific teams, which I think do a good job of that internal innovation. They're good at innovating the things they can control. So I haven't ever heard of an HR innovation team, but maybe they exist. I've heard a lot about marketing and IT and ops, manufacturing. There's all kinds of different functions that have their own sort of focus on innovation. But the important thing is that either they are focused on their own function or there is some sort of coordinating mechanism that brings all those functional innovation teams together. But I've seen those work. We were talking earlier about outsourcing innovation. I know Mike's going to talk about that a little bit here coming up. But one of my clients didn't really want to bite off on a big sort of innovation investment. So we talked about what other options were there. And we kind of arrived at a network of sort of internal, external network. And the idea that as an organization, the larger organizations spend millions of bucks with all these different kinds of vendors. With in the IT world, you've got the IBMs and HPs and Alcatel-Lucents and the AT&Ts and all the offshore guys, and they all have their own innovation functions. But what they don't do a very good job is bringing those ideas to their clients. It's a disconnect, and tapping into that network of all those ideas is something that I think, as a customer of, a large customer of those companies, you have the right to ask for those things. And so we worked with them to blend some of those ideas and some that came from some affiliations with universities into a network that was used to bring ideas and generate some of the work up front. One of my insurance clients has an unbelievable innovation capability that's all based on workshops. And what they do is they offer sort of a service to the whole business around running innovation workshops. And they are fully booked. This thing is a machine, and it is fully booked all year long. They have a team of, 10 or 12 people. All they do is run these workshops for any function, anybody in the business who wants to figure out how to think about something differently. They run these things, they run them to fruition, and they've generated value in the market. One of the few companies I know that actually tracks their innovation investments all the way through. And the innovation overlay is my term for the idea of the idea marketplace. So a lot of organizations have sort of tried this idea out that they'll put out some sort of employee program where you can generate ideas, and the ideas get voted on, and those votes get some sort of promotion in the company somehow, whether they get funded or you get to work, if your idea is selected, you get to work on fleshing the idea out or whatever. At PwC, we actually have one of these, we set out to say, okay, come up with an idea that can create the next $100 million business. And we got massive participation. And it was all, most of it, up until some of those ideas got filtered out, was all, after hours. And the winners got, I don't know, $5,000 or $10,000, I think, as a reward. And they get the winner, the finalist, the winner gets to go work on the project, go figure out how to design the business. But there are tons of references where this thing has worked. It's worked for Pepsi. It's works for Starbucks. It works for a lot of big companies. This overlay idea, where they're not even creating an innovation function that's cranking ideas. They're really tapping into. They're more facilitating getting ideas from the organization. And obviously, there are tons of companies that do multiple sets of these. But organization approach or model is not one that I think is terribly bad. So I'm going to shut up now.